program was started by the chef Alice Waters, who had really established herself in the sustainable food movement and slow food, and as a world famous chef. She founded the restaurant Chez Panisse. And in fall of 1994, she was being interviewed for a newspaper article on the topic of the use of urban spaces. And at that time, Alice was a strong advocate of using urban spaces, vacant lots in particular, for growing healthy, organic, sustainable foods to then be used in restaurants as locally procured produce. And she just said this offhanded comment. She said, "You want to know one way to not use urban spaces? Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School near my home, now that's one way." And of course it gets printed in the newspaper. The principal was a man named Neil Smith, and he read this in the newspaper, this Berkeley celebrity saying that Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School wasn't doing a very good job with things. And he was so desperate for good ideas and to change this school and bring this school around that he just called Alice up and said, "It sounds like you think I could be doing my job better. Why don't we talk?" And so they had lunch at Chez Panisse. They walked down to the school. Neil turned to Alice and said, "Alice, what do you think we should do?" And she looked at him and she said, "Neil, I think that you need to have a garden and have the students gardening together. I think you need to have a kitchen where the students are cooking fresh produce together. And I think you need to be serving healthy, real foods for school lunch." At the time, what this place looked like, it was completely covered with asphalt. There were 5 of these portable buildings all lined up here. None of them had been in use since the 70s. And the north half of this area was a parking lot covered over in asphalt. As you all know, the soil was just completely dead from being under the asphalt for so long. So it was going to be a couple of years before we would actually start planting things in the ground here. But we did put in 2 raised beds, and that's what we started with in the winter of 1995. Cover crop and 2 raised beds. And we hired a garden teacher. That person stayed on in particular through the summer months when he worked with a small group of students who built this garden and created many of the pathways that we walk along today, and the central gathering areas are all original to their design. Walking through the garden, I want to talk about how the garden classes work and how you see all of this. So we'll head to the Ramada, the structure. And so we really got started with 6th grade science classes, coming out here every couple of weeks to have a class in the garden and to do hands-on activities around gardening. By 1997, the garden was well enough established that Neil was ready to say, yeah, step 2 is the kitchen, and we're ready to do it. In the kitchen, we started seeing humanities classes, and for the most part, we were teaching classes that connected recipes from the cultures that they were learning about in social studies. We still today see science classes in the garden and humanities classes in the kitchen. The third leg of that original vision that Alice had was school lunch. This was going to be a district-wide initiative. It was going to be a much, much higher level of funding than the funding required to put in a garden and kitchen here. And so the Center for Eco-Literacy, another nonprofit in Berkeley, and the Chez Panisse Foundation, which is was the nonprofit arm of the Edible Schoolyard, the fundraising arm, those 2 nonprofit organizations teamed up with the Berkeley Unified School District, and all 3 put in a lot of money and a lot of resources over the course of 2 years to completely bulldoze the school lunch program and completely revise it. And what they ended up creating is a from-scratch kitchen right here on King Middle School campus that trucks out all of their meals to the rest of the district schools every day. They're preparing 5,000 breakfasts every day and 3,000 lunches in the pink building that you'll see across campus there. And the program here was starting to get a lot of national press in the mid-2000s. And a lot of that press was very positive and saying, wow, look at what this program in Berkeley is doing. But then there was the negative press, the press that was saying, you can do that in Berkeley, but you can't do that in my community. Some of the criticisms were that Berkeley, you have a year-round growing climate. In Berkeley, you have a relatively affluent population that will support extra programs like this. And also in Berkeley, you have a very food-oriented culture where parents find it valuable for students to learn the skills of cooking and gardening. And Alice Waters heard this criticism and absolutely rejected it and said, no, this is a universal idea. This can be done in any community. And so she set out to help found programs across the country. Those were called the affiliate programs or founding edible schoolyards. And that process of helping to found other programs was not a financial agreement. There was no fundraising that Alice did here and gave money to another program. It was simply a matter of lending support and really the resources of the Edible Schoolyard to help found these 6 programs across the country, in the Adirondacks, in Brooklyn, in Greensboro, North Carolina, in New Orleans, Louisiana, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, in addition to the program here. And now we're just codifying it and writing it down and putting it on the web so that anybody can come and download those resources. And we're also encouraging all of the hundreds of other edible education programs around the country to do the same. They have curricula from elementary schools or from northern climates or from programs that aren't at schools, they're doing after school, programs that are teaching nutrition, things like this. And so all of those, we're really encouraging those programs to get on the website as well. We also provide a 3-day training program for edible educators every spring where 100 educators from around the world come to Berkeley and do a hands-on training at the Edible Schoolyard.
We are just upsizing a bunch of baby plants for the plant sale.
Upsizing?
Upsizing, yeah, they need some more room to grow. The kids are doing the same thing that I'm doing right now. They're upsizing things. Tomatoes. They've been doing a lot of different kinds of tomatoes. These are mostly veggies and herbs in here. Outside there are ornamentals, flowers, some natives. Yeah. And I'm very excited to be here at the Edible Schoolyard where I am the spring garden intern, so helping out here. I've been in the Bay Area for a little over a year, and every time I mention that I'm interested in doing work with plants, everybody has said you have to go to Merritt College, so I finally made it up there and it's wonderful.